everyone, it's May and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all of the books I've read, the movies I've watched, and the TV shows that I've watched throughout quarantine. I meant to make this video earlier because this is spanning a ton of time, all the way back from March is when I'm starting this. So we're just gonna get right into it. I have a list and kind of what I wanted to talk about. Some of them I might just go through really quickly, others I'll elaborate on more if I had like a strong opinion on it. So for books, I read One True Loves by Jenkins Reid. I think I had actually already started listening to this potentially when quarantine started. I've only ever listened to Jenkins Reid's books on audiobook, but I just really like them on audio for some reason, and I really loved it. I've loved all of the books I've read of Jenkins Reid so far. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is one of my favorite books of all time, and then I also listened to After I Do, and this is my third one, and it was so good. The premise is there's this woman who is engaged, and she gets a call from her husband who she thought was dead. She thought that he died in like a plane accident like years ago, and it turns out that he was on a deserted island and survived all these years, and she has to like make this impossible choice between her new fiance, her old husband. So good. Highly recommend. I also read Room. I actually have it right here, by Donoghue. This was popular quite a while back, but I never got around to reading it. It was definitely a very different book than I'm used to reading. It's actually told from the perspective of her son, who's 5 years old. They are trapped in this, basically this shed in someone's yard, and it's definitely disturbing, but also really good, and it was a little bit hard for me to get into just because of the narration, but it definitely gets better, so would recommend. And then I also read, well, listened to The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. This is by Manson, and it's kind of like a self-development-y book. So I really liked it. I obviously didn't agree with everything. I never do when I read books like that. I always try to like read or listen critically, kind of think about my perspective on things and if it aligns. I also really like when kind of what I've read or in like different self-development books kind of connects, because each person has kind of like a different perspective on the issue. It all like connects and it's really cool. So a couple things I wanted to talk about, like points that I really liked from this book, where he talked about how you have to fall in love with the process if you want to achieve any sort of good product. Like if you want like a super ripped body, you have to love going to the gym and lifting weights all the time. Like you can't hate it, because you're never gonna get to where you want to go if you hate the process. Like you'll give up. So you have to find a way to fall in love with the process, like the day-to-day mundane tasks that it takes to achieve a product. He also talked about how if people are better at something than you are, that just means they failed more times. If you see someone who's successful, it's like it didn't just happen. Like no one gets to where they were just by having a bunch of successes, like they had to have failed. I really liked this point. He said that radical changes in perspective often happen at the tail end of our worst moments, because it's only when we're feeling intense pain that we're willing to look at our values and question why they seem to be failing us. I love that. This was really good. I kind of thought about this with writing. I also thought about writing with the process and product one, because like for writing, it's like you have to fall in love with the writer's block and the outlining and all the messy in between if you ever want a book to come out of it. So he said we think that it needs to be inspiration, then motivation, then action, but action can also produce motivation and inspiration. Like you don't always have to wait for inspiration to think that that's going to produce the motivation and action. Sometimes you just have to start with action, even if you're not inspired or motivated, and potentially inspiration and motivation will follow. I think about that with writing a lot too, because it's true. Like some days I sit down and I'm super inspired and I can write, other days I'm not inspired, it doesn't go well, but sometimes when I sit down to write, even though I'm not inspired, it ends up going okay, and then I get more ideas because of that. And then he also talked about how you're never going to be right about everything or like have it all figured out like throughout your life. You just become less wrong, and I really liked that because I feel like I'm always kind of learning throughout life, and I'll look back and be like, wow, I wish I could like tell my freshman year of college self what I know now or whatever, but I certainly don't feel like I know everything, and it like kind of, it's like a growth mentality. Like it leaves you room to like grow in your life, and you kind of takes the pressure off thinking that you have to know everything or have it all figured out at any point. There were a couple things that related to some of Brené Brown's points that I just wanted to note in case you guys have read Brené Brown's books. He talked about the importance of setting boundaries, which, if you know, Brené Brown's really big on that, and I'm terrible at it. He said that we need to get clear on what values are driving our actions to see if they need to be changed. Brené Brown really talks a lot about the importance of getting clear on what your values are, so that connected. He talked a lot about that too. And he also touched on the fear that our lives aren't going to be extraordinary enough, which is kind of become more of a thing with social media, and like I said, Brené Brown talks about this too. Like when you see everyone else's highlight reels, it's like this pressure that we have to be doing extraordinary things and that living what's considered a normal life like isn't good enough. And yeah, coming out of college I can already kind of feel that pressure, so it's nice to hear that talked about. Alright, and then the next book I listened to was Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I haven't read any of her other memoirs. This is the first one I picked up. I had just seen a lot of people talking about it on social media, so I got it on audiobook and I loved it. I really, really, really loved it. She's friends with Brené Brown and I actually heard them talk on Brené Brown's podcast back when I still listened to it because I am so behind now, it's not even funny. And it was interesting because she again like brought up a lot of things that Brené Brown has talked about, but it was like from her personal perspective, whereas Brené Brown is like some personal perspective but also from like that research perspective. And it just kind of goes to show that Brené Brown's work is so valid in so many people's lives, because like here Glennon Doyle is talking about these experiences she's had that fit with so much of what Brené Brown has talked about. So I wouldn't really consider this a self-help or self-development book. It's just a memoir, but there are a lot of like lessons and like life tips sort of like embedded in her stories. The way it's organized is definitely weird, not like a normal chronological order. There's 3 different parts. I think it's Caged, Keys, and Untamed. Basically the premise is like talking about how people, especially women, are put in these like boxes by society and how to break free of it. That's a terrible description of it, but that's basically the premise behind it. And then she kind of organized like her life into those sections, and then within that there are like little chapters, and it's not chronological order at all. It skips around so much, which usually bothers me. Like when I watched Taylor Swift's Miss Americana documentary, don't get me wrong, I loved it, but I was like, why couldn't they have just put this in the order that it happened? Like I can't keep track of where we are with anything because it keeps skipping around. But with this book, I followed it okay. Of course I would rather have had it in chronological order, but I get why she wrote it that way. I mean, when I listened to the podcast episode that she was on with Brené Brown, I think she said like how she had written it like chronologically originally, and then Elizabeth Gilbert, when she read it, told her that she couldn't write a book about being untamed if she was gonna write it in such a normal structure, I guess, and that's why she changed it. But like I still followed everything and I liked how the different sections kind of like wove together and connected. So I just wanted to talk about a couple things from this book. First of all, I absolutely loved how much I just related to her and her daughter. I don't know if Glennon Doyle's like Enneagram type is out there anywhere, but I would bet you she is a type 6 like I am, because so much of what she said was so accurate to me. Like just being skeptical about everything, and just like everything feels precarious, and yeah, that was so funny to hear her thoughts on things like that. And her daughter, she talks about how she was so upset as a baby. She said she like came out of the womb concerned. She would cry at school because the teacher like said something about how the polar bears were dying and everyone else went out to recess, and then her daughter got super upset. The school had to call her and then she like wouldn't like stop thinking about it for weeks after that. And it's like, that is me. Like I was so sensitive, I still am, and like I would cry and get upset by things that other kids didn't care about. Yeah, it's just, yeah. And she had a lot of like good things to say about like being sensitive and feeling everything in the world, because she's like that too, and how it feels like a burden but it can be used as a strength. And I'm still kind of working on that because I still just like hate it. But anyway, a lot of what she talked about was about being true to yourself and trusting yourself over what society tells you you should be doing. There was a lot of her like unraveling that language, like you should be doing this or this is the right thing, and she talked a lot about like building trust with yourself. Okay, my favorite part of this book, I want to know what your favorite part is. If anyone's read it, please leave a comment down below. My favorite part is a story she told about her daughters getting their ears pierced. So they went to the mall. Well, she has a son and 2 daughters. It goes Chase and then Tish and then Amma. And Tish is the one who's more sensitive. And they went to the mall and they got there and Amma was like, let's do it. Like, I'm so excited. Let's go. I'm gonna get my ears pierced. And she was like, no problems, got it done. And then Tish was like, you know, I'm actually not sure that I want to get my ears pierced today. And the employee told her, come on, you can do it. Your younger sister was so brave. And then in the car on the way home, Glennon was thinking about how she had always been told the definition of bravery was being afraid and doing it anyway. And she's like, is that the definition of bravery? But I want my daughters to grow up knowing, like, what if they're with their friends and their friends are doing something that's super risky and stupid and they think, well, if I want to be brave, I have to be afraid but do it anyway. No. And it's something that was so funny. I don't know if it was in this part or another part, but she said at one point, Tish said, why do people always say YOLO before doing something risky and stupid? If you only live once, you should be more careful with your life. And I was like, I have had that exact thought. But anyway, basically the moral of this ear piercing story is that bravery is personal. No one else gets to tell you what's brave, because what's brave for somebody else might not be brave for you in the same way. That day, saying that she didn't want to get her ears pierced was brave for Tish because she was trusting herself and she knew that it wasn't the right time for her to get her ears pierced. Getting her ears pierced for her younger daughter was brave too. She was afraid and she really wanted to do it. She felt that that's what she wanted that day and she did it. So like this, you can't measure bravery by like what other people do. I had never thought about it that way before, but that really shifted my perception on bravery, and I really liked that. She touched on the same theme that was in the previous book I talked about, that we never know everything, we're never completely right, and we're always learning. The thing that related the most to Brene Brown's work, I thought, that also relates to like self-trust, is forming your own opinions. Like, it's easier to conform to a group and just like their beliefs or your beliefs, and you just follow that and you only read things that confirm your beliefs, and it's harder to come up with your own and belong to yourself instead of a group. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense just saying it out of context, but if you're interested more on that, Brene Brown's book Braving the Wilderness talks about that, and it was so interesting and it really just shifted my perception a lot when I read that book, and I liked how this connected to it. The next book I want to talk about is Love Letters to the Dead. I had this book shelved like years and years ago. I haven't read young adult in a while, but I'm trying to get back into it because when I read books that are in the same genre that I'm writing, I find that it's like helpful, at least some of the time. So I decided to read that and I really liked it. It's about this girl named Laurel, and I think she's 15, and her sister died, and she's kind of working through that. Her parents are divorced and she gets this assignment in English class to write a letter to someone who's dead, and then she ends up writing this whole notebook full of letters to people who she admires, like Kurt Cobain, Amelia Earhart, etc. And that's the whole book, is these letters. She's just kind of telling them about her life and what she's going through. And I honestly am glad that I waited and didn't read this book when it was super popular, because there is a lot of heavy stuff in this book. I'm not gonna get into it because spoilers, but there is some seriously disturbing, dark stuff that goes on, and it's told from this teenager's point of view. It's kind of like what she experienced, so it doesn't seem as bad, but looking back on this as someone who's now graduated from college, about something like this happening to someone who's so young, like, it is seriously disturbing, and I don't think I would have realized just how bad it was if I read it when I was in high school. I think I just have a much different perspective on it now than I would have back then. There is like definitely a little bit of what I absolutely hate in young adult books. Like, this is my #1 pet peeve with young adult books, where the characters are in high school but they never have any homework. All they do is hang out with their friends and party, and they cut class and they drink and they smoke, and I hate how there aren't any young adult books that show how high school is for the majority of people, okay? Like, when I was in high school, and I'm not saying like everyone was like me, but I went to class, I did my homework, I had my extracurriculars. I would never have dreamt of cutting class. Like, how do these people not get penalized for this? It just blows my mind. She didn't wear her PE uniform and just like walked laps with her friend. Why would you do that to yourself? It's gonna tank your GPA. Then when you try to apply to colleges, I don't know. And then, but in a lot of books, it shows them still going to really good colleges. I'm like, how did you swing that? How did you do that? And like being out of high school looking back, it seems even more ridiculous. We need more books that show the reality of high school as a lot of hard work and more than just popular girls and sports games and parties, because there's like the main component of high school, which is going to class. And a lot of people read up. I know I'm going on a rant right now, but like I know when I was in middle school, I would read books about high school. When I was in elementary school, I would read books about middle school. And it is so warped. Like the kind of things you read in books, like it's not realistic. Like I know it is for some people. I know when I was in PE, there were people that didn't dress down like they were supposed to. People cut class, people drank and smoked and whatever, but most people go to class, okay? Like, anyway, so it did have that a little bit, and I also did get a little bit sick of the parts of the letters where she would just like talk about the person who was dead. Whatever she was talking about would kind of relate to the aspect of their life she was bringing up, which was interesting, but after a while I kind of just wished that it was a normal story and not having those connections. And a thought that I had as I was getting toward the end of the book, if any of you have read this, please let me know. Like, authors create any names they want for their characters, so I thought it was very odd that Laurel's dad was named Jim and her aunt was named Amy, because those are two of the names of the people she writes to, Amy Winehouse and Jim Morrison. So like, I felt that there had to be some significance in that, and I didn't see it. Because like, I feel like authors don't choose names like that by accident. Like, she could have chosen any names for Laurel's dad and aunt, and she chose those. So like, if she was doing that, like, why weren't all the other names of the dead people in the book somewhere? Or maybe they were and I missed it, but I don't think I did. I don't know. That was just weird. But anyway, overall, I really enjoyed it and I would recommend. Definitely, like I said, some heavy content, but the way it's written is from a teen's perspective, so it doesn't come off that way necessarily, if that makes sense. Kind of like Room. Like, I think that's why it's written from the 5-year-old's perspective, so that it's kind of adding a different light to it. I don't know. Anyway, those are the books I've read. So let's go on to movies. I have watched a lot of movies because we usually have like movie night on Fridays since the beginning of quarantine, so I'm gonna kind of go through them quickly. The first movie is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I love this movie. It was so cute. It's about this woman who's a writer, and she goes to this island to do a story on this book club that was active during World War II, and they formed when it was like forbidden or something, and then they still continued having meetings, and she's engaged, then she ends up falling in love with one of the people there, and like, just the way it's done is so good. There's kind of like a mystery in it too, and the way the story weaves together is just so good. Highly would recommend. And I just really love World War II or post-World War II movies. It's like my favorite period of history. So yeah, as good as it gets. It's kind of about like an unlikely group of friends and their stories. It was okay. It was just really weird in my opinion, and the romance was not doing it for me. I didn't see it. One Day is about this girl and this guy who meet in college, and it goes through their lives throughout the years. Very similar to Love, Rosie, but I like Love, Rosie a lot better. With both of those movies, there is a sense of like, I feel like I just don't know the characters as well as I would like to because we're only seeing tiny snippets of their life, but I felt that even more with One Day, and it was just super depressing. There were like hardly any redeeming moments that made like little bits of happiness, and I don't like it when movies are just like straight up super sad. Like, there needs to be like some bittersweet moments or something, and it was just, for the most part, for me at least, super depressing. I watched Step Brothers. This is like, I feel like a classic that most people have seen. It was funny. I enjoyed it. My dad and my uncle quote it all the time, so now I'll be able to understand that. The Theory of Everything is a story of Stephen Hawking's life. Very, very well done. I loved it. Life as We Know It. It's about this, so I think this couple, like the wife has a best friend and the husband has a best friend, but the friends hate each other, and after the couple dies in a car accident, they're given the child of the couple to raise together because they're who the couple chose, like if they ever were to die. It's funny, it has its moments, kind of, I just consider it like a rom-com. Not my favorite thing ever, but it was enjoyable. The Talented Mr. Ripley, I loved this movie. I'd call it like a psychological thriller, I guess. It was creepy, but it was really good. Kate and Leopold is about time travel. So this guy ends up going forward in time and falling in love with a woman who's in today's time, and it's like about their adventures and stuff. And it was really sweet. Like, I liked it more than I had expected to. I thought it would just be kind of like whatever, but it had like really funny moments and it was just really sweet overall. The Heartbreak Kid is about this guy who gets married. He's kind of feeling a lot of pressure from like family and friends to get married because he's, I think, like in his 40s or something. So he meets this girl and they're dating for a while, and then they decide to get married because she's like gonna get sent somewhere for her job, but then she needs to be married to not get sent there or something because they weren't sending married people. So it's like already not good because he's like just doing it because of that. And then it went on their honeymoon, everything goes wrong and it turns out that it was a terrible idea. Then he ends up falling for someone else while they're there on their honeymoon. I really didn't like it overall. I have kind of like a threshold where if movies are too raunchy, I just can't enjoy it anymore, and this surpassed that. It was too much. It was just way too over the top, and at the ending scene bothered me so much because like even in a movie that's supposed to be like straight up comedy like this, I still want to see a character arc. I still want to see the main character learn something or go through something, and the ending scene was supposed to be funny, but it really just bothered me because it showed that he had not grown at all. I watched the half of it on Netflix. I had very high expectations for this movie and they were not met. It's about this girl who writes people's essays for them for money. It's like her business in high school. This guy approaches her and is like, I need help, and she's like, okay. And he's like, but it's not for an essay, it's like for a love letter that I want to write to this girl that I like. And it turns out that she likes the girl too. And I'm like, this is so interesting. It's like such a different story than you'd expect, because like you'd expect her to fall for him and then be jealous that way. But I just didn't like it. I was not sold on why anyone liked this girl, not even the connection she was supposed to have with the main character. We never found out like anything about her. The scenes that were supposed to be like impactful just didn't do anything for me. When the main character performs a song at the talent show, I'm like expecting it to be like really meaningful and like the lyrics to connect to what's going on, and I didn't get how that happened at all. Yeah, and I didn't get what the main character had learned by the end. I didn't get kind of like what the ending was even supposed to mean. So I don't know if this just went over my head or what, but it did not do it for me. The couple things I did like about it were the friendship between the main character and the guy. It was so cute. He like stood up for her when she was getting bullied and stuff. And I just really liked that the movie tried to take it in a different direction, just like romantic tension between them, but it just didn't work for me. And then I watched The Matrix. I can't believe I've never seen this movie, but I just never have, and I feel like I'm gonna understand so many more references now. I really liked it. I had to keep pausing it and have my dad explain stuff because I was lost because sci-fi movies go over my head a lot of the time, but it was really good and really interesting. And it was so funny. Jillian had told me before like Divergent had taken stuff from The Matrix and Inception had taken stuff from The Matrix, and I'm like, really? Come on. And then I watched The Matrix and I was like, yeah, I see it. So the next movie was Room, the movie adaptation of the book I read. I probably shouldn't have watched the movie right after I read the book because I was like going into it with like, all right, what are they changing about it? What are they messing up? But yeah, I always feel like I'm way more critical of movies when I watch them right after reading the book. But I really did like it. I think they did a great job with it. I just wish they had put a couple more of just like the sweet little scenes between the mom and the son in Room before they got out. They changed a lot. Like the whole part after was so different. Like they had them stay in the mental hospital for a way shorter amount of time and like go home. Everything happened at home. They cut out a bunch of characters, which is understandable because they needed to fit it into the movie and it wasn't like that significant. They changed a bunch of people's names for no reason. And of course, like the whole beginning part where we see a couple of like normal days for them in the book that's like spanning a whole bunch of pages is cut down very much in the movie so it gets right to the action. Yeah, so I did really like it overall. I just think like in terms of the changes they made, like I understood some of them, but I do just wish they had put a couple more of like the sweet scenes and like lines between the mom and the son in room to kind of establish that relationship more, and how they did have some like good happy moments before all the conflict. I watched Under the Tuscan Sun. I've always seen this movie, like parts of it like on TV, but I'd never seen the whole thing, and I really liked it. It was like Italy, and what I liked about it was that it wasn't like a super cliche romantic comedy plot line. Like it led you to think like certain things were gonna happen and then they didn't. It definitely like not everything was like happy and good all the time, but there were like good moments in it. And I just wish for the very last scene that it had kind of continued with that, because the last scene just like wrapped way too much up. I wanted it to end before that last scene. I didn't want to know that things happened like that. I watched The Impossible. This is one of my absolute favorite movies that I've watched during quarantine. This was amazing. It's about the tsunami that hit Southeast Asia in 2004. This family goes to Thailand for Christmas and are hit with the tsunami, and it's about their story of survival and how they find each other again. It's definitely not like a ton of death and destruction, like that part's very short, and then it's mainly about how they get separated and how they find each other, like scattered in like different hospitals and stuff. And it's based on a true story, so that's really interesting as well. And it was just really good, and the way it was done is great, and it's just such a sweet story about a family. Then I watched Where Hands Touch. It's about this girl who is mixed race, black and white, in World War II time. She falls in love with a German soldier. Her dad was, I think he was in the French army, I think. He was like from Senegal, I think, and like he and her mom met and fell in love, and her mom had her, but her dad's not in the picture anymore, so it's just her mom, her, and her younger brother who's white. So like her mom had him with someone else later, but he's not in the picture either, so it's just the three of them. Like at the beginning, it's all about like how she can't be without her identity papers. She has to have papers that say she was sterilized, even though it's not true. It's like a lot about her identity, and like she like believes in Germany, but she's like not even allowed to because everyone like discriminates against her. And it's just interesting. Like I had never seen a story about like from that perspective. It's always just been like about the Holocaust and stuff, at least the movies I've seen. So that was really interesting to see like kind of a different perspective there, and it is a love story as well, because she falls in love with the German soldier, and obviously they're not supposed to be together. And from watching the trailer, I did not realize that things were going to take as dark of a turn as they did, but then the movie got like really dark in the second half, but it was really good. And lastly, I watched Leap Year. This is a pretty classic rom-com. Like I could see the whole plot laid out. Basically, like I knew what was gonna happen before it did, but it had its sweet moments, and yeah, it had its funny sweet moments, but just very predictable classic rom-com. And lastly, moving on to TV, I have not watched very much TV. I'm actually not a huge TV person at all. I don't like trying to watch a whole season of something with not knowing if I'm gonna like it. Like a movie is just like an hour and a half to 2 hours of my time. If I don't like it, oh well. But it's like I don't like watching a season where I'm like, is it gonna get better? I don't know. I like Gilmore Girls and My 600-Pound Life and Step Up High Water, and then I just like rewatch those shows instead of watching new things. I did rewatch Step Up High Water. I'm on season 2 right now, and it's just as good as it was the first 2 times. And then I'm also in the process of rewatching Gilmore Girls. It's actually been almost a year since I first started watching it. I'm watching it with Nicolina, so we'll do like our Netflix party. Anyway, getting off topic, but I mean that is the TV I've been watching basically. I'm on season 6 of My 600-Pound Life. I just kind of watched it whenever it was on the TV, and then once I got Hulu, I watched all of season 5, and now I'm on season 6. Oh, just kidding. I didn't finish season 5 because the Asante brothers episode was like, wow, this is just way too over the top, and I stopped watching it, but I should probably go back and watch that. I did finish watching You season 2. This was way back at the beginning of quarantine. I watched season 1 last summer, and I watched season 2 in March, and it was phenomenal. Like, I think it was better than season 1. I thought that like it definitely followed a lot of what happened in season 1. Like, you had the main plot of who he was in love with, plus like someone who he was helping, kind of that morality dilemma where you see him like condemning someone else for something that they did that was wrong, and it's like, wow, like, yeah, exactly, like, he's doing a great thing by helping this person get back at this person. And then it kind of is like, wait, no, he's doing stuff that's wrong too. But I think season 2 is even better than season 1. It was just so good. I liked his relationship with the girl better than in season 1. And then like there were so many plot twists. Like, it really just like kept you on your toes the whole time, like especially toward the end. I was like, oh my god. I really wish they had ended it at the end of season 2 though, because the way it ended, I thought it was like, okay, actually stop watching right now if you haven't seen it yet and you're planning on it, because I'm gonna spoil something. So once the picture goes away, you can turn the sound back on. Anyway, so I thought that with Love, he had like met his match, especially toward the end. I was like, wow, like he actually has someone who knows everything about him. He's not hiding anything from them. And like, there's no secrets. He's in love with her. Like, she knows everything and is okay with it. Like, this is what he wants. And then it ends with him finding someone else. He's like, oh yeah, even though Love's pregnant, I'm gonna stalk my neighbor. Like what? I don't want to see season 3 then. Like, where do we have to go still? Like, what else can happen? Like, I thought that he should be happy now. I feel like it's just gonna be filler. I don't know. I just don't think it's gonna be good, but we'll see. We'll see. I really did plan on watching more TV before I filmed this video, but then I just didn't. I watched the first episode of Normal People on Hulu. I'm trying to watch a bunch of Hulu shows before it goes away when I lose Spotify Premium, because people had said it was so good. Like, I'd seen so many great reviews, and I watched the first episode and it was so hard to get through, even though it was only 30 minutes, and I really didn't like it, but I will try to continue and see if it gets better. That is going to be it for this video. I'm sorry this was so long. I really did not plan for this to be this long, but thank you. Please let me know if you have read or watched any of the things I talked about, what your opinions are, if you have recommendations for me for the rest of this year, let me know. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!